All right, the time is 6:32. I will call to order the Monday, December 19th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting. We'll start with the roll call.
Michael Murray, Adam Gigas,
Here.
Richard Harrington,
Present.
John Glenn,
Here.
Sean Zavinsky,
Here.
Mitchell Kale,
Here.
Lamont Kiefer,
Here.
Nellie Pater, present, Dean Peterson.
All right, we have a quorum. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have agenda item number 1, approval of minutes from November 15th, 2022.
So to approve.
Second.
I've got a motion by Lamont and a second by Nellie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the general portion of the agenda, we have agenda item number 2, housing assessment presentation by Vandewaal and Associates. So I think, who do we have on the phone today? I can't see without the glasses, so.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Scott Harrington was able, I didn't know if you there was going to do an introduction or you just wanted me to jump right into it.
Yeah, we.
Great. Can who's ever controlling things give me permission to share? So while that's being done, just as was just stated, we have conducted a brief housing study. It consisted of collecting data. It also consisted of talking with some of your larger local employers as well as builders in the area to try to get a handle on what the situation is with the housing situation sort of across the board, not just looking at any one particular aspect of, let's say, owner-occupied single-family homes or rental apartments, but sort of looking across the spectrum of what maybe some of the needs are, where some of the activity is, and then also providing a few thoughts on some things the city might do if it were interested in taking a more proactive approach. And we have a couple of examples from some other communities and what they are doing. So it looks like I've got permission to share my screen, so let me get that going here for you. All right. So in the report, as I said, we've got some key findings, and I'll just kind of provide a quick summary. And then if there's certain things you want to go back over and talk about in more depth, we can do that. I also can bring up a copy of the report. So if you did get a chance to look at that in more depth and want to talk about anything specific within that, on a specific page or table or what have you, we can definitely do that as well. So as I mentioned, we did have some stakeholder interviews with realtors, developers, large employers, the chamber, city staff. A couple of key findings were that there's a lack of both availability in terms of lots and unit types, quality and diversity, as well as affordability, where infrastructure, building materials, labor, lending are all challenges that I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, hear a lot about on the news. And that many of your employers are continuing to expand, but there's nowhere for these new employees to live, and so it's forced a lot of people to commute to Tomah that might otherwise want to live there. So you have these employers that are continuing to draw people to the community for work that we think also would like to be residents, but there's a lack of availability to meet their needs. Demographic shifts are occurring, folks are getting older, household sizes are changing, need to have units that reflect that. Can't solely rely on the private sector alone to address some of these challenges, where community could step in to kind of help move some things along that would be challenging for the private sector development community on their own. And that the community has a lot to offer, but needs the housing in order to provide people with that opportunity to set down roots and really grow within the community. So just a couple of quick data points here. The populations continue to grow over the last 20 years, but that growth is starting to slow. We think that, you know, unless we address the housing issue, that will probably continue to happen where we see growth, but not as much as we could otherwise realize. Average of about 36 units a year are being built since 2010. And of the 394 that were constructed in about the last 10 or 11 years, 22% were single family, 7% were manufactured homes, and 30 were two family or a duplex, and 41 were multifamily. So there has been activity sort of in all these segments, and there probably needs to continue to be. Demographic shifts, again, folks getting older, single person households are increasing. Overall, the average household size is decreasing, and a lot of folks over the age of 65. So the city's housing stock is changing with more multifamily units and a decline in owner-occupied percentages with this increasing age and folks living in their homes for longer periods. What we find a bit in Toma and a lot of other communities we work in are that there are seniors that would, are sick of mowing the lawn or having to shovel the driveway or pay people to do those things and would like to move out, but there aren't options necessarily that would keep them in the community that aren't offered, and they don't want to leave the community, so they end up staying in their home. So we address some of those needs. We kind of help churn the stock that you already have, as well as addressing needs for people you already have. Fluctuations taking place. Homes are being sold in less time, and there's a shortage of developers and builders. We kind of see this across the board, that since the Great Recession drove a lot of the smaller developers and builders out of the business, and there really hasn't been anybody to kind of take that up. Nationally, there's a huge housing shortage. I should mention that these interviews took place more in the middle of this year, before we really saw this sharp increase in interest rates. So in terms of like the market time and how long it's taking to sell a house, that may have changed here over the last couple of months. But prior to that, there was a pretty quick turnover once houses became available. Economically, the city has a lower median household income, with over half or nearly half of households having incomes less than $50,000 a year, and 24% are what we call housing cost burden, in this case paying more than $100,000 a month. So cost burden, as defined by the Federal Housing and Urban Development Agency, is you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing and housing-related costs like utilities. You're considered to be housing burden. If that's too much, and that really cuts into your quality of life, because so much of your income is being put into housing, you have less funds to be able to do other things. Trends in the housing supply and kind of in the community is that we're seeing stagnant school district enrollment, a disproportionate number of people employed in the community living elsewhere, and as I mentioned before, employers are expanding, and your tax base is diversifying. So there's a lot of opportunity in the community, but we just need the housing to assist with that. So in terms of what are the benefits for attracting new housing, obviously one is tax-based growth to really help keep your tax base healthy and bring in the tax revenues to provide the services that your residents have become accustomed to. Increased population growth helps absorb those units and really turns the economy by people who earn wages in the community, spending them in the community, and the turnover and the multipliers that go with that. Increase in school enrollment, you have the capacity, so and you have a great school system, so bringing more people in would certainly help their situation, since a lot of their formulas are based on how many kids they have in terms of funding they get from the state. Increased traffic for local businesses and increasing the local labor pool to keep your employers in the community, keep them growing in the community, rather having to look elsewhere where they can find workforce. So a lot of benefits beyond just putting a roof over somebody's head, a lot of multiplier effects through the community that really help in a number of areas. This is just a graphic we have about, sort of a diversity of housing, everywhere from young adults that are just starting out on their own to couples couples starting a family, to folks who are then becoming empty nesters and retirees, and really providing a variety of housing types to meet all aspects of this sort of life cycle, and pretty much have needs throughout the community in all of these. And as I mentioned, you can kind of work in one area, let's say if we provided some more senior housing, that then starts to open up that existing housing stock for new families. So even if we kind of focus on one or two aspects, it does have a ripple effect into helping some of these other areas as well. So kind of set out some ideas of what could be done to move this forward. And I think part of what the LRPC wanted to know is this something that council would like to see them spend some time on, see us as Vanderwall spend some time in taking a bit of a more proactive approach rather than assuming the private sector would address all of these. So we've gathered this housing data, we've identified some of what these opportunities are. There's some zoning changes that could be made to really help facilitate some additional development. You're just starting to undertake a comp plan update where you can set some further goals for housing, produce some materials, we can identify sites, recruit developers, and put some of your funding mechanisms that you already have in place to help move this forward. So kind of outlined a number of steps that could be taken over the next couple of years and all the way on through 2039 when your TIFs close. You can keep your TIF open for one additional year and use the increment from that one additional year to put towards a housing fund. So quick summary, again, there's no one single housing issue or gap, it's sort of across the board, and we can kind of start to address this problem in any one or multiple of those points. The two general options for that, one is greenfield development, or sort of, finding large expanses of vacant land, typically at the edge of the city or maybe even currently outside of the city that adjoin the city, that could be developed into a mixed density neighborhood. We don't typically recommend that we sort of put all of our eggs in one basket. So if we got, let's say, like a 20-acre site, we would suggest having multiple different types of housing, even within that one development, some single family, maybe even a couple of different lot sizes of single family, some duplex, and maybe even some multifamily to address all those segments. That also really helps. And while you are growing, you're not growing huge. And by developing in multiple markets at the same time, those unit types don't necessarily compete against each other, so it makes the project much more financially feasible because you're not putting in all that infrastructure and only having one type of unit that may take multiple years in order to sell out or fill up. The other option then is infill and redevelopment, finding sites, maybe some downtown loft conversions or other sites within the downtown or existing neighborhoods where you can have some infill development to take advantage of the infrastructure that's already in place that then tends to make that development more financially feasible. So I've got a couple of examples of what some other communities in Wisconsin are doing to address this more proactively. And it's not to say that Toma should do any one or all of these, but just to give you an idea of what other communities are undertaking to address some of these same issues. In the case of Fort Atkinson, which is just east of Madison, they did a 10-year update to their comp plan. They rewrote their zoning and subdivision code and conducted housing studies to really get a handle on it. So they did a more in-depth study than what we did here, but I think a lot of the same data points sort of emerged. They actually went out and acquired a 76-acre property, annexed it into the city, and then contracted us to prepare a detailed development plan that had multiple types of housing shown in it. They then went through a developer recruitment process and are in the process of executing an agreement with one of those and completing an amendment to one of their tax increment districts. They're using TIF funding and in their case also using some of their ARPA money to assist with the infrastructure and are looking to kind of get the first phase going in 2023, which in this case will probably be some multifamily, but there is single family kind of planned down the road. Let's see. Oh, sorry, my mouse is acted up. So this is the concept plan for that. Again, a 76-acre site, 238 total units, 142 single family of different sizes, both homes and lots, some two family and some multifamily. So the single family is kind of shown in the yellow, the two family in the orange, and the multifamily in the brown. So they're going to start kind of on the south end and build their way toward the north. Next example is the city of Horicon, east of Beaver Dam. They too did a 10-year comp plan, and the county in that case conducted a very detailed housing study. They did some developer recruitment. There was property available that the city did not own, but had been working with that property owner for quite some time to try to get something moving on it. Part of it got developed as a subdivision prior to the recession, and then the rest of it's just kind of sat there. So negotiated a deal to bring in actually two builders, one who's doing for sale small lot single family, kind of more medium or larger lot single family, and then for sale duplexes, as well as an apartment builder. And the city is using TIF and ARPA funds from both, in this case, both the city and the county to offset the infrastructure costs in order to keep these prices at a place where those in Dodge County can afford them. The infrastructure really eats up costs and really raises the price of homes that are then out of reach of many. And so this really helps bring new affordable housing to a community. And when I say affordable, I mean affordable to people who are working in that community. There's a very large John Deere factory there, for example, that those people can afford to pay. So when, in this case, talking about affordability, not talking about folks in poverty, I'm just talking about people who work at John Deere, nurses, firemen, policemen, who definitely have some funds available but can't afford a $400,000 house, which we often see with new construction. So that infrastructure is underway now, and the couple of foundations will get started here pretty quickly to move that project ahead. That's a total of a 25-acre site with 82 units, 36 single family, and 36 multifamily. And you can see this kind of extends an existing subdivision that had already been started, but then is really sat vacant for over 20 years. Last example here is in Prairie du Chien. There's a strip mall that would kind of really fall on hard times. It was sort of a strip mall slash mini mall where there was an interior hallway in part of it. The big chunk of it burned down in 2013 and then went into tax default. So the city and county eventually foreclosed, and then the city purchased it directly from the county, came up with a redevelopment plan. They too have a number of manufacturing employers that really desperately need workforce, and there was really very little housing activity there, way less than what you all have experienced. And so kind of carved the site in half, put apartments in the back and new commercial up in the front, signed a development agreement, provided money to the residential developer, both on the front end and on kind of a pay-as-you-go deal, to support site preparation, demolition, and to really make the site development ready. So there are 3 apartment buildings under construction as part of phase 1, and as soon as those are completed next year and lease up, they would start kind of a mirror image phase 2. So this is just generally what that concept looks like. Where the residential is kind of here on the bottom part of the drawing, you can see the 6 buildings, and then they have covered garages that are kind of in the middle, and then several commercial buildings up in the front. So the residential has started and is continuing, and there are ongoing conversations with a few different businesses on building out the front. So some things to kind of think about and maybe provide some feedback to the staff, to the LRPC, to us, is addressing the full spectrum of housing and gaps of priority for the council that you would like to see pursued. And should we focus our collective attention and effort on one issue or gap over others? So in your opinion, is there a particular segment of the housing market that maybe needs more attention than another at this point? Are these maybe a good place to get started? One would be senior center project. We're doing an analysis right now of looking at how the upper floors of the 2 buildings that sort of comprise the senior center could be used for housing, and we'll have that report available shortly into the new year. And then also seeking a greenfield housing site. Are there properties sort of at the periphery of town that are fairly large, or just outside of town that we could annex and work a deal with the owner and seek developers to build that? So at that point, I can open it up for any questions that you may have or any feedback that you all want to provide.
Questions or comments from you? Yes.
My question regards to zoning. What changes can we do in zoning that would help developers more than anything else? If you were to make 1 or 2 changes, what would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been working on this project with Ben Rohr with our company, and he's been a little bit more involved in that aspect of it than me. But what we often see in municipal codes are, first, the lot sizes tend to be pretty large, and land is a significant portion of when you buy a house of what you're buying and what you're paying for and the costs that go into it. So allowing smaller lot sizes, maybe in the 5,000 to 6,000 square foot range, would really help reduce the land cost. The other thing that it does too is that, as you line the lots up on a street, that's that many more units that can absorb the cost of the street and the water and sewer lines. So there's definitely economies of scale and allowing smaller lot sizes to help reduce the infrastructure costs and to help reduce the land cost. And then with that then would probably be some smaller setbacks so that you can still comfortably fit a house on that. Another may be looking at what your highest density is. What we find in a lot of communities of your size, that density or number of dwelling units you can have per unit per acre can often be pretty low. And if we can raise the density, again, we get those economies of scale and can bring the density up to make projects more feasible. So those are 2 general ones. I'm personally not familiar enough with your code to tell you right now, but that is certainly something that we can get back to you on with a quick list of things that you could look at.
Those ideas sound great, but they only apply to new development. It's hard to change lot sizes on the existing zoned properties that are already lotted out.
Very true. One other thing you can do is allow what are called accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. Some people call them a mother-in-law flat or a garage apartment, but where you would allow somebody to use a portion of their house, maybe it's the basement, maybe it's a detached building, to create a small rental unit. So by doing that alone, you've effectively doubled the density of the property. So we've helped a number of communities write ordinances for that and to maintain the quality of those. Often, for instance, the owner of the property has to live in one unit or the other. So rather than the whole thing becoming rental, the owner would be on site and the other unit would be rented.
Lamont, any question?
Yes, Alderman Kiefer here. We talked about the municipality being the purchaser of the parcel of land. You've talked about the municipality using TIF money and ARPA money. Are any of those monies ever recouped by the municipality, or are they just put in the pot and just lessen all the costs all across the board through the process?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say in almost every instance, they are recouped generally through the higher taxes, because we're creating new tax base, we're going to generate new taxes. On the buying the property thing, there are a lot of ways that you can get control of a property without having to outright purchase it. For instance, you can enter into an option with the property owner. So you could take an option, usually for maybe a few $1,000s, that would buy you 6 months plus or minus or a year to go out and find a developer who would then actually maybe purchase the property and close on it. So it's not a very expensive proposition where you need to come up with, hundreds of thousands of dollars to rent out and take title to a property. You can often work a deal with the property owner to get an option, and then the ultimate developer would purchase the property. In the case of Oricon with their TIF and what they're putting into the infrastructure, they've had to bond for that, and the TIF is near the end of its life, and so they're somewhat relying on tax increment from existing projects to assist, but if that were a younger TIF, more of the age of the ones that you have, for instance, it would more than pay for itself over the life of the district. It is a little tricky using TIF for housing, especially for single family. There are some limitations under the statute on how much of a TIF district that a residential area can take up. There's also a minimum density requirement of about 3 units an acre in order to be able to provide assistance to a project. So there are ways to work with the TIF law, but there are also a little bit of challenges with it. So I just wanted to, make that known up front that we can't just run out, buy a property and slap a TIF on it. There are some things we would have to take into consideration to try to make that work. But I think with some of the properties that we've identified and given the fact that you have several new and fairly extensive districts, that we can find a way to make that work with one or more sites within the community.
So then you're saying that the developer actually pays for the land then one way or another. You can either purchase it first through a bonding or something, and then the developer would pay you, or you take that option and then the developer pays for it. So you're actually, the land is not the municipality's cost.
Right, I mean, it kind of all flows to the bottom line, right? I mean, so from a developer's perspective, they've got land, there's infrastructure, and then there's, of course, the cost of building the units themselves, whether that's individual homes or some kind of a multi-family configuration. So assistance is, when you add all that cost up, and especially with, what we've seen with the inflation and construction pricing, and now with significant increases in the interest rates, you can build units. The question is, can anybody in the community afford them? And so some of those are probably going to need to be written down one way or the other. So whether it's the land, whether it's the infrastructure, whether it's the building costs, there's probably going to need to be some level of write-down, and it just would kind of depend on how that deal is structured and kind of how it came forward. So in some cases, it might be more offsetting the cost of the land. Others, it might be more offsetting the cost of the infrastructure. It just kind of varies depending on what the existing condition was. Like I said, at Oricon, the land was privately owned. The landowner's been trying to sell it for quite some time. The city's been trying to assist him in finding developers. We finally were able to do that this year. And in that case, the developer just outright purchased the land, but the city put in all of the infrastructure. So we can kind of skin that cat a number of different ways, depending on what the, particular circumstances are with any given deal.
Okay, and then the city just recoups through tax increment then? They're not, the developer's not paying, or anyone paying for the infrastructure per lot or any type fee like that? It's just actually coming through the tax base with the new increment?
In that case, yes, that's how that's working.
I mean, I understand it can be structured in many, many different ways.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Nellie, you got a question?
Yes, this is Nellie Cater. Question, is there any assistance from the state on development at all for the city to apply for?
I'm afraid the short answer is no. The state has really not been much of a help at all in addressing housing issues. For rental projects, there is something called the low-income housing tax credit, or sometimes referred to as LIHTC, or just tax credits that developers would apply for. So it's not something the city would apply for. It's the developer, if they had a fairly large multifamily rental project, they could apply for LIHTC credits. And the long and the short of the way that works is that that's cash into the project up front at essentially no cost to the developer, but then the developer agrees to limit the rents as a function of area median income for 30 years. So the developer kind of gets all the money up front and forgoes income over 30 years by offering the units at below market rates. So everybody who lives there pays rent. It's just a function of how much they pay based on the formulas that are set when the project is created. So that's probably you have to apply for that. That's a competitive program. There's also non-competitive credits too. But the developer would do that, and it only really applies to rental projects, not for homes that would be, or apartments or condos that would be offered for sale.
So I'm understanding that basically it's going to be based on the developer and only the developer to come and cost-wise.
If they're seeking the LIHTC credits, yes, they would be the one to be making the application. They would get the funds directly. I think what the city would maybe do is identify, what kinds of housing would you like to see being developed in the community, then seeking sites that are good candidates for that type of housing, and then kind of beating the bushes to bring some developers out. We can go about that more informally. We work with a number of developers, not as clients, but in situations exactly like this, where we have communities that we work with that have needs, and we know which developers are kind of operating in which areas, which type of housing they're interested in, and try to get them to come and be interested. Or we could go through a more formal process if we had a site locked down in some form or another, where we could put out a formal request for proposals and see what sort of responses we get from developers. So I think it would kind of depend on what type of housing we're looking for, how much opportunity there might be there, how big would it be, how many units, to really kind of determine the best approach for finding the right developer for the right site.
Thank you.
Yes?
John, you had a question?
Yeah, this is John Glenn, had a question for you. Do you have any experience with, in order to attract developers to fill up a site, if you design the layout of the different types of lots you're looking for by opening it up to maybe the developer only has to do 10 of the lots? So instead of having one developer do a huge project or 2 developers doing a huge project, maybe it's 10 developers doing smaller projects, because I would think as the building, prices are going up, there might be people, builders potentially willing to bite off, I'll build 10 homes, or I'll build, 5 duplexes versus 40. You know, that might be a little more palatable, you know, maybe get it filled up quicker, but do you have any experience with that, or?
Yes. So in Fort Atkinson, they were really open to that. You know, I showed you that site. It's fairly large. There's several different types of housing and a number of units within each type. So they were open to having sort of multiple builders, you know, submit to take, I'll take this piece, you take that piece. They found one who was willing to kind of take the whole thing, but I would guess that that company will end up sort of subbing out, if you will, pieces. But they agreed to kind of take control of the whole thing. In Horicon, I mentioned that, you know, we have one guy doing a couple of different types of for sale housing, and then we have somebody else doing an apartment complex. That's kind of exactly what happened. They both sort of showed up at the same time, and so they really are independent of each other. One just wants to do apartments, one just wants to do, you know, single-family homes and some duplex units. We're also working on another project over in Washington County in the village of Jackson, so just kind of south of West Bend or north of Germantown, where in that case, the village already owns the land. The county has gotten very involved and very interested in helping to solve the housing issue, again, mostly driven as a workforce issue, because they have a number of growing employers and continue to attract more, and workforce is really the biggest sort of impediment to those businesses really being able to do everything they want to do. So the county has started a program where they're helping to assist with getting homes built that are under $300,000. And in the case of Jackson, county is sort of front-ending the cost of the infrastructure. So the road, the water, the sewer, the stormwater. And we'll be soliciting proposals from builders for a limited number of lots. So we're not quite there. We'll know more in a couple of months how that works out. But ultimately, there could be anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 different builders kind of each doing a piece. So to make that scenario work, somebody kind of has to step up front and kind of figure out how does the whole thing lay out, how are the streets and infrastructure going to get built. You know, it's hard to build a street a few feet at a time, right? Because somebody's got to be able to put out front that infrastructure to make those lots buildable. And that's probably the role that the city would need to take on in order to then be able to attract multiple builders to fill it up.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, hey, Scott, so I guess on these projects like in Port Atkinson and Horicon and stuff like that, what is the average lot size? Because you're saying you want more density in these communities, so like what kind of lot size would we expect for like a single family home in that situation?
Yeah, they really vary. So I would say that in Fort Atkinson, you're probably looking at 6,000 to 10,000 square feet. And the home sizes then likely would vary as the lot sizes do. In Horicon, that subdivision that we're kind of adding on to already had fairly substantial lot sizes that were like 15,000 square feet or more. So we're doing a few more of those, but then we're doing several smaller lot sizes that are more, in that case, around 7,500 to 8,000 square feet.
So you don't really see much like half-acre parcels, you know?
That's just extremely expensive. So when you think about that, you know, a half-acre home, you're talking 20,000 square feet, probably has 100 feet of frontage. And so when you think about building the street and the water and sewer for it, you know, you have one house where you could have 2 or even 3 to help absorb that cost and to drive that price down. So I don't know how deep the market really would be in Toma. For a half-acre size lot, you're probably looking at a $400,000 plus house. And I don't think that's probably the one segment of the market that's being the best served.
So yeah, we want to focus more on the $150,000, $200,000 house on a smaller.
Yeah, well, and again, just being honest, I mean, even just the cost of the home these days, if we're, you know, talking in somewhere about a 13 to 1,400 square foot house, you're pushing 270 just for the bricks and sticks. Never mind the land, never mind the infrastructure. So that's really where, you know, when you start adding land and infrastructure on, you start very quickly popping up over 350, approaching 4. I don't know anybody who's able to build units right now for under 200,000. It just it is almost impossible with what's happened with construction costs over the last couple of years.
Are any of these communities doing anything with current homes that are in their cities to upgrade them or remodel or increase the property value that way to get more taxes?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is no. There are other communities in the state that have some programs. You know, I mentioned the idea of when you close a TIF, you can actually keep it open one additional year and use the increment from that year to put into a housing fund. And so there are several communities that have done that and are using some of those funds to assist homeowners to you know, shore up the homes that they already have. But that is great for, you know, maintaining the housing stock that you have and retaining those owners that you have, but it doesn't fill the gap of people who want to be in the community and don't have an option. So it's not an either or thing, it's an and thing. But most of the communities that we're working with now are more focused on trying to provide a way to bring new units in and are not as focused on assisting with homes that already exist. But there definitely are some, and we can share some examples of that too.
One more question on these multi-family homes, not duplex, but like the apartment buildings, so to speak.
Mhm.
How many units are you seeing per building, and then how much land does that, like, per unit take, or excuse me, that per building take to build?
Right, no, good question. You know, it kind of varies with the marketplace and how much absorption the developer thinks that there is in the community. So in the case of that Prairie du Chien project that I showed you, I want to say there's 18 units in each one of those buildings. So they're kind of coming out of the box with about 48 units in one phase, and they'll have 48 in another. The apartments in Horicon, those are 3 buildings of 12 units each. In that case, the garages are attached. Typically seen in a smaller community like yours, that somewhere between 12 and 20 units of building is about as much as somebody wants to take on. They don't want to overbuild what you know, that can be absorbed. You don't want to sit on a lot of empty units for a long time. And so through these multi-building configurations, they do kind of start pieces of them all at the same time, but they kind of gap how they're finished so they can kind of fill one up before they're ready to start moving into the next one. Again, to kind of maintain their costs and not have a lot of empty space just sort of sitting there waiting for somebody to show up.
So how much land is that 20 unit taking up then?
Yeah, so the density really varies. So in the case of Prairie du Chien, they've got, I want to say it was 4 acres for the residential, and they've got, at the end of the day, they'll have 90-something odd units. So, you know, you're looking at densities of, you know, almost 30 units, 20, 30 units an acre. Horicon, it's probably more like 12 to 15 units an acre.
And do any of these properties have underground parking, or is that enough space for parking, I guess, with people in a small space?
No. So as I mentioned, the one in Horicon, they have garages that are built right into the units. So they're not subgrade, they're kind of at grade. And it feels a little bit more like a townhome. In the case of Prairie du Chien, they have detached kind of gang garages where they're sort of all lined up. parking under the building is a wonderful thing and a great way to really promote density, because you're not using all that land for surface parking, but it's also incredibly expensive. So we're looking at a project right now in Slinger, which is also over in Washington County, and really trying to figure out a way to make the cost work. In that case, they're looking at almost $25,000 per space, $25,000 a space when you look at the cost of what it's going to be to excavate that basement and to do it all in concrete, which you have to do for fire separation. It's a wonderful amenity to have, but it's also a very, very expensive one. So typically with that, you're looking at higher end units or perhaps a tax credit project that really could afford to take on that kind of a parking arrangement.
Richard?
More a comment than a question. As I look at this situation here, we've got basically 3 different populations, and we're talking about the affordability for each. You got the household that has an income of 100,000 plus. They can afford a single family residence without any trouble. So when you look at the population with the 50 to 100,000, it's hard to build a unit unless it's a considerable number of units and make it cost effective to keep the rent affordable for that population. When you get under 50,000, it's almost impossible to build new to house them unless you're getting federal subsidies for that, to subsidize that rent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
John, go ahead.
Yep, this is John again. I have one more question for you. I've heard the term, granny pods used in the past. And in a way, it sort of sounds like, is this sort of how it works? Like a person might, instead of living by themselves in a house, small apartment on some property, they buy one of these, maybe when they sell their house, the zoning allows them to have it be like an apartment on an existing lot. And then that house becomes available for someone else to rent that can afford to maybe buy a house. Is that more like a zoning change to allow it to happen? And it sort of happens on its own, but I don't know how much a granny pod costs, or if it's just plans, like you have to meet these certain requirements, it has to be this size, it has to, I'm not familiar with anywhere that they actually allowed it. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, we had that. My grandmother, we built a little apartment for her, and she moved in, and she didn't have to go away to a nursing home, and she loved it. She was independent for a lot of years, and it worked out. But don't know how you allow it,
Yeah, it would definitely be a zoning change, because, in the typical single-family district, you're only allowed 1 unit per lot. So you would need to change the code in order to allow this, again, what we planners call accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. And there are often, almost every case, there are size limitations that the ADU can only be so big, or both in terms of maximum square footage or percentage of the main structure that it can take up. Some communities allow them to be freestanding structures, so you could sort of build a little unit, let's say in the backyard, or if you had a detached garage, put a unit on top of that. Also, like in terms of how utilities are handled, whether they would have a separate water and electric meter, whether those would stay together. And there are different reasons why you would want either one or the other. So yeah, there are a lot of regulations that go with that. Even if you allowed it tomorrow, I wouldn't expect a flood of those. If it's something you're gonna do, it's a lot easier to do when you're first building a house, but not every house can really be a lot retrofitted to accommodate these, but some can. And it's just one more way to try to encourage more housing that can be affordable, and where you're making use of existing infrastructure, because to add another unit on your property, street's already there, the water and sewer are already there, it doesn't really put any more burden on the city in terms of having to maintain new or upgraded infrastructure. It's already in place, so we're making the most out of the investments that we've already made.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I will say there's a really good map in your packet. I believe it's the last page of the presentation. It kind of shows where planned neighborhoods might go, but it also kind of shows, you know, Mike always tells us we're a city in the middle of a swamp. It shows the amount of wetlands, what would be considered DNR wetlands that are around the city as well. So you can kind of see the interesting challenge we have is trying to push this outward. So do we know from a council standpoint, Becky or Kirk, what our next steps are with?
Giving you the information, and then we're actually gonna start meeting with a couple of landowners to try to facilitate a project. But obviously, we will need to bring that back to you with a plan and what we're gonna do, and we wanna make sure that you guys are on board, and, you know, like I said, this is laying the brick and mortar, and it's just gonna continue to grow, so hopefully when we come to an end, we're gonna have a good end product that's gonna work for the city, for our funding, all those aspects of it. And I think where Vanderwall will definitely help us, on the end is with the RFPs, with developers, the zoning, all these things. So it's not gonna be tomorrow we're gonna have a project for you, ready to go. Try to get your approval, it's gonna take some time, and that's where we're starting.
So thank you.
Well, won't this also go through Long Range Planning Commission then, which is the body that wants to take this on?
Yeah, it's come there before, and this was just more information. So I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. Yeah, this came to us, and then this is informational, but yeah, then it'll go back with the knowledge of that you guys have asked a lot of really good questions, and spurred conversation.
Because there's a lot that could happen, you can go back to industry and see if they're interested in partnering, there's all kinds of things that can be looked at, so I'm sure those will all be vetted down in the long range planning, and lots of meetings and things will take place before it comes back here again.
Correct. We're trying to always get a committee to give a recommendation on this, on these things. There are a few steps along the way that, you know, I think we brought the senior center project, the assessment that went through long range, and then here, and, you know, again, it's a building block, but we will try to start with long range planning on just about all of these cases, and then bring it up to this body then.
And we can always bounce it back, or however, they may go back for it. I mean, yeah, these are just, big projects, so this isn't gonna happen overnight.
This is great, thank you for doing it, and if more people are helping share the cost in Toma, it helps the taxpayers, and helps businesses, and helps sports teams and everything. We get more families in town, don't drive from another town, live in Toma, it's a good town.
I think where staff started is we had a lot of probably ideas, conceptions, but we really felt that we needed Vanderwall to kind of bring these all together and guide us along the way. I think what you can see from all the examples that he gave, Pershing, Horicon, Fort Atkinson, this isn't their first time doing this, and even though we may have our own conceptions, it might be just focused on what we've traditionally done here, so I think they're gonna be a great asset for us to move forward with this and get the right thing for us and best bang for our buck, so to speak, with this.
I have a question for Kurt. How much wetland is in the way for future development as far as, trying to find a big pot of land to build a big project?
Sure, you're always gonna have those hurdles. We have identified quite a few parcels, not only, I think, a good majority of those were included in here, and there are probably some that were even missed, just because of, you know, just because it could happen. It's a big ordeal. So, just because we don't have them within the city now, I would not look at that as a negative, because annexation is always great for growth, and there are a lot of opportunities with farmland, you know, to the west, to the north, all over. So I think it's better, as Scott said, to try to utilize our existing infrastructure and the money that we've invested and try to infill or redevelop right now.
Scott, I saw you had that map up for a sec. Is there anything you had on the map, the future neighborhoods where they could go or things like that? Anything to add on that piece? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I coughed there for a minute and muted myself. No, I don't really have anything to add. That was sort of the very first kind of quick and dirty look at it, of overlaying your future land use map, like with the wetland map and other things, like where are areas that have already been identified for future residential development that, you know, where we have some dry ground, and maybe where they adjoin some TIFs, and where we might be able to bring that tool forward. So that was just the very first kind of quick pass at it. And I think what we would do next is to work with the staff and maybe the LRPC to kind of narrow that down to what we think are maybe the most viable sites, and then see if there's interest from those property owners in trying to work something out.
Richard, do you have a question?
I have another question in regards to the mapping. You identified the wetlands. Did you also identify some of the floodplains, and is there a possibility to possibly build in some of those?
Yeah, we did look at both, and again, we haven't gone down to looking beyond just sort of published data for both of those to look at actual sites and whether some of that can be mitigated. As I'm sure you know, not all wetlands are the same. Some are under the jurisdiction of the Corps of Engineers, some are under the jurisdiction of the DNR. Those that are under the jurisdiction of the state, there's a different set of rules. They're a little bit easier to deal with. And with the floodplain, again, there are some things that can be done at times to take property out of a floodplain. The question is, you know, what's the cost-benefit analysis of doing that? So we're not at that level just yet. This was, again, sort of a high-level look at where some of these things, as you put these layers on a map, what sites start to pop out as perhaps being the easiest and most viable to start with.
I'll add to that, Richard, if you look at the map, I think that it shows page 33 on what I have on here. The yellow hatching identifies the wetlands, the blue hatching identifies a 100-year floodplain, and then that green hatching is the 500-year. So I think that might be what we're looking for.
Well, my question was more in regards to the possibilities and the difficulties of possibly building or getting relief from floodplain,
Well,
so that you could build in those areas.
I think in general, Shane is going to follow what rules he needs to in general. There, you know, we've dealt with a property on Jefferson Street, and we're going through that right now. It's no different than a lot of these other properties that are on here in the hatching areas.
Because I know some of that over there by the Farmer's Addition off of Brownell are listed as floodplain, but really, I've never seen a flood in 50 years.
Yeah, the map does show that it's blue, but I think it,
Even the 92 flood didn't get that high.
yeah, I think we can appreciate that we knew this was going to be complicated. And, you know, I'll pick on Mike again, you know, we built a city in the middle of a swamp. And it's just interesting to see that challenge kind of very clear as to what it is. So I think this is great work. I'm excited. This is going to be one heck of a challenge, but I'm glad we're going somewhere on it. Any other questions, comments for Scott? Anything else for the executive team on this one? All right, thank you very much, Scott. This information was great. Thanks for presenting again.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Everybody have a great holiday. I'm going to pop off at this point.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Scott.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, we are going to jump down to agenda item number 6 with the design, construction, management agreement for the Ice Center multipurpose building addition.
Incorporated, Tom Sayer, President, Potomac Youth Hockey, and Jay Greeno, Vice President here. We talked about this a little bit last month for the allocation for the 1% room tax for the addition to the Ice Center at Recreation Park. We're to the point here we want to get moving forward with that. In your packet is the agreement with Keller to do construction management and design, to get all the bid packages together, architectural engineering, and also to be the construction management on site. Similar to the project we did at the Rec Park in 2014. This project, I know Potomac Youth Hockey has talked about it with their board about working with Keller. We brought it up at the Parks and Rec Commission. They had a few questions that Kelly put a letter in there. Hopefully that answered the questions. With the fees associated with construction management, I know there's cost to that, but we as a Parks and Rec department with a small amount of full-time staff. Hockey is a volunteer organization. They work full-time and then they run the programs through volunteers. We had no problems in 2014 with that addition, on time, on budget. They're on site, making sure that a quality product is added to the Ice Center. That's why we felt once this project came up to work with them again for this addition, being at Recreation Park with time-sensitive activities with fair, tractor pull. They worked well with us, making a minimal impact on site, so that's why we're looking to move forward again with them for this project. And room tax is funding this project, and the sooner we can get this addition. Tomorrow night on the agenda is Potomac Youth Hockey would like to, they're working with possible bringing a junior A hockey team into town, which hopefully in return puts heads in beds on the weekends for those activities, which pays for improvements to Rec Park. So the sooner we get moving on this, the better, especially with bid times. Kelly has spoken about to us at prior, getting the bid packages together and hopefully get things going out there, as soon as we can. So, any questions for me or the group here?
I have a question for Keller. In your letter, you have estimated budget range from $975,000 to $1 million, a little over $1 million. How did you come up with that total figure?
Okay.
As far as cost?
Sure. We put together a needs assessment discovery with the hockey group, and we actually drew preliminary plans. And that's how we come up with a budget. It's almost like we bid it ourselves. We have estimators on staff, and we treated it almost like a project. And in addition to that, I contacted all the mechanicals, plumbing, electrical, HVAC. I gave them a plan. They came through the building, they saw where everything is, and they gave me a number. So that's how we came up with the estimate. You never know until bid date. I could put that in my letter, what the numbers are gonna be, but I feel pretty confident we're gonna be in that range and hopefully in the low range. I prefer, when I told my guys, I said, I'd rather bid date, we're all happy, rather than being over the budget, so.
And this is current,
Yes, yep, those numbers are still good,
Okay.
yes, yep. There's, just briefly, we see construction costs are finally starting to level off. The steel prices are leveling off, lumber has actually gone down. Unfortunately, this project doesn't have a lot of lumber on it, but, so things are finally starting to level down. HVAC, electrical is still high. We still struggle a little bit with lead times, but back to your question, I feel pretty confident in telling you tonight that it'll be in that range. Yeah, I did have a contingency in there, I think it was, what did I tell you, it might be 50,000?
75.
It might be 75, I'm sorry, I didn't have the breakdown in there. So, yeah, and it should be all inclusive, no surprises. I think we proved on the first hockey thing, we came real close to what the numbers were on the fire station, a little bit over, but that was a really volatile time with price increases, and we didn't really miss it by that much, and we did some value engineering to get it down where you're at.
So if we come in range and the council approves the project, you would subcontract this to?
Yeah, we take all the bids go again directly to you. Keller's not building it, we're not self-performing. You may wanna ask us to put a bid in for the steel like we did for the fire station, cause we're pretty competitive in that steel area. And lead times, we buy a lot of steel, we're one of the biggest in the nation, not in the state, of square footage and volume by steel, so we should get good pricing on that. If you wanted us to submit a bid when everybody else does, you guys open the bids, Becky opened the bids the last time, it'd be the same thing. Normally, we wouldn't self-perform anything.
I'll make a motion to move forward with this.
Second.
Got a motion by Mike and a second by John to move forward. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a little FYI for why we requested that letter. We were a little taken back at 30% of the total cost of the project. I guess we never looked at, I never did in the EMS building, that 30% of the cost was actually non-building.
We call it
Design
engineering. Soft cost.
Soft cost.
It's,
And so
I've been doing
some
this.
of the members were.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that in the 975 to the 1.15 million, that those
All
costs
those
were
fees.
in there.
Correct, they are. All of them are.
Just
Yeah.
for everyone else, that's why there was that little
It's-
caveat of.
I've been doing it for 45 years, and that's what it is. Most contractors are gonna make 10% profit, 5% overhead, and 10% general conditions, and you usually got an architectural fee of 8%. And ours are a little bit under, kinda gave you the discount of doing multiple projects here in Toma. We love doing work here, so I kept it under what the
Yeah,
industry.
she gave us about 4%
Yeah,
discount or so, under the national, or
Yep.
the average,
Yep.
32%. So.
great.
Yep. Thanks for that explanation, because I think it smoothed things over.
Sure.
So I have a question, I guess. Is this a project that we need to do if the junior team doesn't come? Is this a project that is,
Yeah, we talked about that. For us as a building, we need to upgrade that facility for our user, which is Toma Youth Hockey Association. That would just be an added bonus. I mean, we have their one high school locker room with a shower, and then there's only one other locker room that has a smaller shower, so we're adding 2 locker rooms that meets updating to this facility that both will have showers, bathrooms in the locker room, so they can host more female hockey teams is a big push too that they're looking to add there. And right now, I mean, it's just upgrade to our facility as a building at Rec
I
Park.
just don't wanna see, I wanna see we have a return on investment and not like, just get this one team in here for this project.
No, and I'm sure they'll use it. A couple weeks ago, they had 10 teams here for a hockey tournament, and I'm sure, you know, the more dressing rooms and stuff, the off-ice, and as a city building too as well, the addition to the storage room is a benefit that if you go to the tractor pull banquet or to the fair, we have our gymnastics mats and boards in the corner, and I just don't think that looks good for the visitors. So at least some of the storage we could maybe get hidden during the off-ice time as well, so.
And then, I guess I just cautious starting another big project. We have so many projects going on. I guess, I don't wanna guess too far into projects. I mean, we got Rec Park, so the Rec Park building here, we got Winnebago, we got, Eagle Center, Flint Avenue, Fair Avenue, EMS building, we got a bunch of streets to do. I mean, are we logging ourselves down with a lot of projects?
This is being funded by the,
I'm not asking about the funding, Mike, I'm saying just,
well, it's the city, there's a lot of projects going on.
I get
But
that.
it's all being funded, so if it's all being funded, there shouldn't be an issue of how many are happening.
Do we have an estimated time frame, Joe, of if everything goes well? I mean, I
fast
know it's
time
all,
frame. I know hockey wants to get in there sometime next November is their goal, but, that's gonna be pushing it, so, you know, as soon as we can get this agreement signed and get, Keller going on their final architectural and bid packages, the sooner we can start breaking ground out there, cause like I said, you got track pro fair and
Kelly,
stuff.
Kelly, how soon could we be in if it moves as fast as we possibly could?
The best time would be the middle of November, and what's gonna dictate that is the steel delivery. Steel is a little bit tough on schedule, but I put a calendar of events together for the guys, and I'm saying the end of November.
So first of
next
the
year.
year,
Yeah,
generally
Yep.
speaking, first of 2024.
yep.
Okay.
And, okay.
And as, to answer your question, Mitch, that room tax that we talked about last month, that comes up in March next year, so we need to have, we wanna have a project, so we, and this is the next project, and we continue to upgrade facilities at Rec Park.
I just feel like I have to ask that question.
so maybe to assuage some of that, is then this project the one you would oversee then? So Keller would be working with you then, Joe? And
Yeah, and the nice thing, that's why we're paying Keller for construction management. And like talked earlier, they're on site, that's why we're paying them to be there on site, so, because we don't have the city resources or staff to be there 9 hours a day making sure this project gets done. So actually, this is really smooth project like we did in 14, where like Winnebago, where, you know, down there and stuff, it's legging on and other things, but this is, that's why we hired them for construction management. They're there and they're gonna push it
Insurance
forward.
policy.
So is it normal to just pick someone to do this, or is it normal to ask for bids on something like this for a project?
Either or. I mean, we felt comfortable that Keller did the Ice Center addition, and the hockey's talked about with their group, and that's why we're, you know, we don't need to, as, you know, put this, they do all the bidding for the actual production of the facility. We
Yeah,
don't
but,
pick
I mean, we're
engineers.
still paying them to provide a service, so is that something that we have to put out to bid as a city, or is that something we can just choose on when we're spending $300-some thousand?
For engineering, we could choose,
Okay.
as far as that, that's
So,
our
and
policy. so.
Keller has done the project for 2014, correct?
So they're,
The first project.
Correct.
That's kind of nice.
But he's just asking, is there an obligation to put it out?
No, it's a good question, make sure we're doing everything above board, it's important.
I can answer that if I.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No,
It's considered professional services. Professional services, you don't have to go out and get multiple bids. If you're comfortable with somebody, a lot of municipalities, they like the architect, they like their engineer, and they stick with them, they do the work. They check them occasionally on pricing and things like that, but per state statutes, you're allowed to do that.
I mean, I know we got bids on the appraisal for people, and, I mean, we got bids on,
The reason why we did it with the appraisers is, well, first off, we don't really know anything about appraising or assessment, and we needed to know professionals out there. We had no idea what it would cost. We've had the same company for 30-some years or something
Yeah.
like that, and so we felt more comfortable. We didn't have a trusted person that we could go to like we do with Keller here, so I think that's a little bit different.
and then is the EMS building on par for?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Take this opportunity. Things are going fine there. There's no surprises. Everything is planned. And
No change order.
I
Nellie,
don't think we can talk about the
Oh,
EMS building right
okay.
now, because we're on,
okay,
we're
sorry.
very specific on the agenda.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mike. But I appreciate you being willing to jump into it, that it's going so well that you're willing to hop in there.
And just want to thank you for moving up on the agenda tonight, and also, Merry
Yeah,
Christmas
it's
to everybody.
all Becky made sure that, that we had it on lockdown, so. Other questions on this one? All right, so as a reminder, the motion on the floor is to approve. Hearing no other conversation, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Kelly, it's excellent work again, I really appreciate
Thank you.
everything you do for us. All right, we will jump back to agenda item number 3, special beer and wine permit application by North American Squirrel Association for the annual NASA funding banquet on March 25th.
Motion to approve. Second.
Third.
All
Uh,
right, Kale for motion and
Pager, second.
Peter.
wait a second. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 4, resolution accepting donation of land.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Mike and a second by Richard. Any discussion?
Can we have a background of this, please, Kirk?
Sure. So the project, which included Brandon Street, we did the engineering design work, and it was found that, I'm not sure her exact residence, but when you first come off of Brandon Street, Ms. Dubois is on the south side, and she actually owned part of Brandon Street. So what we've traditionally done, not all the time, but traditionally, we like to relieve the property owner of any assessments for, if they're in line with what we want to negotiate. That's our negotiating tool. And that's what we came to a successful agreement with her, giving us the land, and then we would forego the assessment. And it was quite a sizable piece of land in the actual street, so I think it is fair to both parties.
All right, Nellie, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Do we have a plan for that land?
It's actually the street.
Oh.
It was just, the street was not put in the right spot, so.
Oh, okay.
It was, we were using it for the last however many years, but we just come to find out that it's actually Michelle Dubois' land, so.
Oh.
We're
So our
cleaning
street
up
is on
some of
her
the
land,
skeletons.
and we're gonna buy it from her, basically.
Yeah, yes, we're not going to assess her for the curb, gutter, and sidewalk improvements that were going in there in trade of the land given to us.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Move to approve. Oh, we do.
We already have a motion on the floor.
Aye.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 5, annual renewal of taxi cab licenses for Running Incorporated, DBA Toma Transit.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Mike and a second by Sean. Any discussion?
Is this something else that we would look to,
Get more bids on it?
yes?
So these are for the vehicles that the
The
city owns.
vehicles themselves?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is, they're
Well, they're
the
both vehicles. that
taxi
city-
cab licenses is what they're
Okay.
for.
When does the,
So the contract, and so we are actually, that's gonna actually be on, it's either later today or this one, or
oh, yeah,
I think it's on this one.
okay.
So what we're looking to do, because we need time to be able to do an RFP, just like
Yep.
we did with the assessor, just
Yep.
like, and so our plan is to do an RFP in 2023 for 2024. So later on in the agenda, you'll see the renewal of the current contract just as it is for the next year. And then we plan on going to bid next year for that.
Okay.
So we'll let you guys know as soon as we see more of that. So we do need to kind of continue, because like I said, we don't have time to get anything else in place. We're aware of the issues you talked about last
Yeah.
month and everything, and you're not the only one. So we're looking at that, but we've got to tie things up and make sure that the things are right. We have a current contract, and just make sure that we get all of our funding from the state.
I think one of the biggest complaints I get is our taxi cab service in the city. For my constituents.
It's on the list.
Yeah, we'll grab that. I think that's agenda item 9, so
Yeah.
we'd love to talk about it. We'll talk about it pretty quick here in a little bit.
So these are both our
These are
vehicles
for,
and their vehicles,
they're for,
because they own some of them too, don't they?
yeah, they're any vehicles that are being used within the city by running for taxi cab services. So they have all of their, they've had their mechanical checks, the police department checks on them and all of that. It's all in.
5 of ours and 2 of theirs.
Yep.
Nellie, is
I have a question. Is this combined with the lease agreement on agenda item 9? Is this separate, or is this?
Yeah.
It's two separate things, because this one is actually, because annually, every vehicle that operates as a taxi in the city has to have a license that's issued by clerk's office. It has to have this is an official taxi. So that's what this one is. It's for the vehicle. And then the one that you see later on in the agenda is the actual contract between us and that.
All right, thanks.
All right, any other discussion on just the licensure of the taxi cabs themselves? All right, so a reminder, the motion on the floor is to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Did we have a motion in a second?
Yeah.
Who was the motion?
It was Mike and Sean, I believe, for the motion second. All right. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 7, secondhand article and jewelry dealer licenses application for Antique Mall of Toma.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Sean and a second by Nellie. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Question,
Yeah.
are there any other establishments that should be licensed as secondhand dealers?
Yes, we have one, we have 2 other ones. One of them's gonna be coming next month because they just turned in their, application Friday, I think. So we're late, and that's the one, the charging, I think it's a charging station. Or coin operating
Oh, the one at
units.
Walmart?
Yeah, that's the one. And then the other one is Christie's Place, which it looks like they are out of business, so we did not get a renewal for them. I'm not aware of any other ones that should be having a second hand, and if you are, you can certainly.
Well, I was just
send me
curious
their
about the
names.
nonprofits, particularly Goodwill and, gee, I need it. Where do they fall under this ordinance?
I'll have to look more into it, but I can bring it back next month for you if you'd like.
Is Christie's Place, is that the one that was on the corner?
Yeah, that's
All the
where
stuff.
Steve Neal's was, down there in the old mobile station.
That one?
Yeah, he's moved out of town, he's down in town, Toma now.
How about the one that was by like Strike Zone?
Oh.
Medicine shop? What's
I know
that
which one you mean?
That's what is that the one that?
Across from the museum,
Yeah, Crescent Museum.
they're going to.
That's
Yeah.
Christie's.
That was
Yeah,
Christie's.
it's Christie's.
Yeah, I think they actually moved out of the city limits, so we will be seeing them in our.
All right, I think we are beyond the bounds of our agenda item here.
Okay.
So let's move on to agenda item 8, ordinance revising ordinance section 38, streets, sidewalks, and other public places, first reading.
So, you have before you, section 38, just kind of cleaning up some of our language in our ordinances. And this was initiated through, I started with the street privilege opening permits, and this is where I got to. And the few items in red are what we're proposing to change. First one is in section 38-2. Just a wording, construction and disturbance. If you continue to 3880, that's a little bit more lengthy, but basically that's kind of where the permitting end of this I kind of alluded to start with, where I went and ended up trying to clean this up. Is there any questions on this? We have ran this through Public Works and Penny, and also our engineer has visited this to give their blessing on this.
Look good to me.
So the gist of it is, you can't dig in like the right of way or the alley, is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, without a permit, you need a permit to dig in the streets, and really what this was driven by was TDS coming to town. They're gonna be coming in force, so we wanted to look at that permit application and make sure that we had it tuned up, so we didn't have any problems with that company in particular, along with other ones that use them, but they're the ones that are gonna be coming in with 6, 8, 10 crews and working at a time, and it's gonna be hard to keep track of it, so.
So, I mean, the agenda item is,
There's no
for
hurry on that.
sidewalks and streets, though.
Well, that's
Is that in
where,
there?
that's where it would reference our permit for those contractors or other people to use that portion of the street right away. That's why it's in that area.
So financially, will we get more money then out of this?
We do
Or-
not, excuse me, we do not charge a fee for that.
Okay.
And I guess the reasoning is, you know, we could have hurried up and got a fee and made some money off of TDS, but it just didn't really feel right about that. And for our other customers, really the people that we normally see is We Energies, Alliant, and they're just gonna end up passing those on to our citizens, so we just take the approach that as long as we know that they're there, what they're doing, and then we follow up as best as we can to make sure the improvements are put back, restoration and that, we're comfortable with that approach.
So, let's say they're doing work on someone's property, how soon should that property owner expect the property to be back to the way it was?
So I'm gonna just define, property. Now, the right-of-way would be the city's property. Now, if you're talking about, personal property, that's between you and them. That would be an agreement between you and them. On this, I've actually put in, I'm varying parts of the restoration, whether it be blacktop, or seeding restoration, trees I've even alluded to. They are given 3 months, obviously, when the weather is permitting, to get it restored. And if it doesn't, then I say that I will pull the permit and not let them continue to work. So, am I gonna be that rigid? Probably not, but at least it's a starting point, and we have to have that communication and relationship, see how it grows.
So, people should expect the safety cones in their yards for the next 6 months?
So, obviously, the winter is gonna be a little bit more unforgiving. I guess what I would encourage anybody that's having that issue is they have billboards up with their phone number to call them, and that's what they want. If there's an issue, they want people to call.
I have it on the main website too,
Yeah,
it's
I
like
just asked them.
right there, their contact information, and they actually asked us to make sure we let people know to contact them directly if they have questions about things.
And I don't want to necessarily pick on them, but they are really the big player in town right now, and the ones that we're gonna have reoccurring, issues with, so. But in here, there's, we asked for a bond to start with, we can't manage that, we're not gonna do that. What I asked them for is a proof of insurance, and that's really the requirement that I'm looking for. And take your time, there's not a rush to get this pushed through. I think we have it for first reading. There's not a big push to get this going, so.
All right, any other questions? Does anyone want to offer a motion?
Motion to,
Motion to approve.
second.
I got a motion by Lamont and a second by Mitch to approve the ordinance. Any further-
Changes.
Ordinance changes, thank you.
First reading.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 9, approval of 2023 public transit lease agreement between City of Tona and Running Inc.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I got a motion by Mike and a second by Sean to approve. Any discussion? Mitch?
What?
I think this is now we're at the,
I know.
He already kind of said, we.
So,
yeah,
so
we'll
we're,
wait, but-
we're gonna open it up next year,
Yep, we're
for
gonna look at it for 2024. We don't, like I said,
so we're kinda stuck with them right now.
for right now, for the next year, it will be the same exact contract that we had before. And so nothing is changing, but you can be assured that the senior executive team is working on that.
So fees wise, they're keeping the same fees and everything for charging?
For 2023, yes. Their
So-
fees are not changing.
So any rider that goes there, it's not changing?
Correct.
And then there's a whole filing with the state and everything, isn't it, for our number of hours, and there's a whole process that goes through that new application, correct? Because we apply for how many hours that we can operate this,
It's a big
and how many
process,
employees, it's
yeah.
a huge process when we put it out, because we want to evaluate how much time we need,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera, so
It's
it's
gonna
a,
take some time.
yeah, it's a complicated process, but very thorough.
We'll do it right.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 10, resolution declaring official intent to reimburse expenditures from proceeds of borrowing.
I can
Motion
talk to
to-
this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Lamont and a second by Richard.
What were you gonna say?
Becky, go ahead.
I just, normally Mom would have done it, she's under the weather today, so. But this was the resolution she was talking about last month, I think she had said she was gonna be bringing this. This is the one that's going to allow, some of the project work, to be, starting to buy supplies and things like that right away at the beginning of the year, maybe before we even go to borrow, so that we can use those proceeds, of the borrowing to pay for it, basically buy it ahead of time before we actually go to bond, and that's what this is for, and that list of projects is on there. So that's all this is, it's required by our council to, not you council, but council like lawyers, to be able to make sure that we're using the funds appropriately.
And the money is available.
And that the money is gonna be available for us to use so we can reimburse ourselves later after we get bonded.
All right, any further discussion on this item? That was
Today.
Lamont and then Mitch.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
At what date do we intend to bond for this?
We haven't set that yet.
It hasn't been said, I thought we were thinking sometime in March or April was what we had talked about, but that's not been said.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 11, resolution authorizing payment of monthly bills.
Move to authorize payment.
Got a motion by Lamont, second by John. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 12, request by Tomo Public Housing Authority for forgiveness of share employees' retirement.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Richard and a second by Lamont. Any discussion?
Yeah, what's in it, basically, what we talked about, Becky?
Okay, so what happened was, in the past, we had a shared employee, one that the city paid a portion of her wages, and when she retired from the city, there was a significant payout due to like vacation that was saved up and sick time that gets paid out. And so it was significant enough that the Public Housing Authority has requested that the city forgive their portion of what would be paid for that large payout out of the account that's going to be utilized for housing and other, Kirk, do you remember the name of the account?
I think it's CBDG.
The CDBG fund.
Administrative fees, there's actually an account called.
Administrative fees, right, so that's the request was that we just basically forgive that amount that's owed, and take those funds out of that CDBG account, and then we'll be square.
Any other questions, comments? Richard, do you have anything?
Well, I'll make a comment. Those administrative fees were accumulated over many years due to the diligent work of that employee. both on housing issues. A lot of that was raised on rental housing. Houses that we bought back and rented for 3-4 years and then sold.
Any other questions, comments?
Do we have a use for that money now? And that's what they want, that we gave.
I'm sorry.
The Toma Public Housing has a use for that money?
The Toma Public Housing, I think is, right now, I think they're,
I think they operate on a lot tighter budget than the city would, so, you know, it isn't, real positive for them to be paying out that large sum of money. It does impact them quite a bit.
Any further discussion? So a reminder, the motion on the floor is to approve the request. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So before we head to reports, I kind of want to take a temperature. I feel the energy's flagged a little bit. Do we want to take a break for 5 minutes before going to reports, or do we just want to go into reports and finish?
Rip off the Band-Aid.
Just keep moving.
Keep moving?
Forward.
Keep moving, okay. We will move on to the report section then. We have agenda item 13, Historical Preservation Commission update. Oh, Sean's going to the podium.
Hey, good evening.
Do we know you? Have you been here?
I don't know, but life is so much better with glasses. I can actually see out of them now. Good things I think are coming now for the HPC group. Last year or the years before, I think the group was kind of spinning its wheels a little bit. We focused on the cabin. That was our main focus. Now that we have the cabin done, that has gone back to Park and Rec, and the cabin fund has now been transferred over to Park and Rec. Going forward, we are going to take a more professional approach. We found that there are more carts before the horse, so we need to go back, come up with a mission statement, and make that formal. From there, clean up some language as to what the group, for the bylaws, to move forward with a local ordinance. If, I don't want to say a local ordinance, but a local historical registration is the word I'm looking for. And there's a state and a federal, but we think that people could benefit from a local register as well. And moving with that, I'm going to be working with the state. I should back up. We're going to take a 3-month break, reconvene in March. And in the meantime, I'm going to work with Jared Tisch from the state to get caught up on the rules and regulations of different aspects of how to get on that local register. What do people actually need to do? And go from there. And I think it's going to be more of getting it out to the public, making people aware that these benefits exist. And from that, the other goal is to get on the website, the TOMA website, to make it known that our group exists. And if people have questions and put different topics out there, that is a goal of mine, to keep people abreast. And so I think with those few things, I think it's a good step moving forward with this group. Other than that, in our general account, we now have $367 to our name, and we're going to move forward with our one main fundraiser in August and go from there. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Exciting work there. Good work.
Yes.
I'm glad it's getting more official, as it were. All right, moving on to the city clerk. We have agenda item 14, the city clerk monthly report.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll be fairly brief, just a few things. We finished up the November election, got all of that put to bed. We did fill our part-time deputy clerk position, So we finally have someone new starting. She'll be starting on Wednesday. Her name is Rachel Craybaum, and she's freshly moved here from Oregon. So we're excited to snatch her up and get somebody new. So we're very, very excited for her to start. Like I said, if you wanted to pop in City Hall, she'll be there Wednesday. And she'll be working the shift that Matt was working, the 10 to 2 on Monday to Friday, the 4 hours. So, very excited. Some closures because of the holidays. Wanted to remind everybody that City Hall will be closed for the holidays. We will be closed this Friday, the 23rd, and we will be closed on the 26th after. So it was a 4-day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday will be closed over the weekend. And then we'll be closed again December 31st through the 2nd, January 2nd, I believe. The 31st is a Saturday, yeah. So Saturday, we are open the Friday, the last Friday of the month, but we will be closed that Monday. We recognize our holiday the day after if it falls on Sunday. So that's why, just keep that in mind if you need anything from us. I did put the November general election results. Those are finalized. I have them on the agenda tomorrow for acceptance. I don't think I put them on this one. And just a reminder that, you know, for incumbents who are not running for office, I do need non-candidacy paperwork. I have to put it out and publish it by December 23rd. Otherwise, I have to extend the deadline, which is not a big of a deal because I talked to our remaining candidates already. So if you do have papers and you're taking them out, they do need to be back no later than 5 o'clock p.m. on January 3rd. The last thing, and I actually need a little feedback from you guys on this, is it's likely that we're going to have a primary election this year in February due to the state Supreme Court, I believe. So if so, that is also the date of our council meeting. So I think in the past, we've either moved it back a week or moved it up a week. And I'm asking if it's okay if we move it up a week, so it would be a week earlier. So the second week of the month instead of the 3rd. Would you guys be okay with that?
Yes. I'm good with that.
I'd have to check. Okay. All right, but, so, I don't know if you need, we don't really a motion or anything for that, I don't think, but it's just a matter of the second week of February instead of the 3rd.
I won't be here, but that's okay.
Okay.
John will give us date up on Valentine's Day for the.
Yeah.
I'll be out of town.
It'll be the 13th, 14th. If someone can't make it, if they just wanna call me and let me know so that I can make sure we have a quorum, and then I'll let everyone know ahead of
So
time.
it'll be the 13th?
It'll be the 13th and
Oh,
14th.
I'm good there.
13th for Monday.
I already put it down. I put it down.
Oh, all right, you're good, you good? So that's really all I have, just getting ready for end of year stuff and working on the, old personnel manual. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, so normally we would talk to the treasurer, but she is not here. Are we?
She did ask me to present her November 30th cash and investments report for approval.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mike and a second by Lamont to approve the November 30th, 2022 cash and investments report. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That was agenda item 15, if you were keeping track. So agenda item 16 will be discussing.
Yeah, it was just for discussion. It's a report she submitted for you to look at, and I'm sure she would, if she's here tomorrow, would answer questions if you have them.
We don't normally, do we approve the revenues and
No.
expenditures for this question? Okay. All right, then. So we move on to Parks and Recreation. Agenda item 17, Total Parks and Recreation Program Report. Joe.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a quick update. Parks Department, busy with the snow removal. We have a lot of limbs down on our trails, and it's been quite the battle. One employee's been on vacation. He gets back on Wednesday, so hopefully he get caught up. He's somewhere warm, so pick on him when he gets back.
Good luck coming back to
yeah. So we're a little behind on that, trying to stay, but bear with us with that. We try to get things opened up. We have, removed it a couple times on our sidewalks and trails, but it was quite the adventure last week. Winnebago kind of standstill now with the weather. Most of the mason block is up for the bathroom, so hopefully weather, when that breaks again, they'll continue working on the roof and so forth for the bathroom. And then, with the late, construction for that, we'll have to do a lot of cleanup here in the spring, but, we're well aware of that as well. Other than that, we have renters and so forth for the holidays, at our shelters. Recreation programs, we have our adult and youth basketball programs going on, as listed in the report. Thanks to Jenna Mosier, Mayor Mike Murray, and all their volunteers, and a group that put on a wonderful special needs event yesterday at Recreation Park with that. And we just move forward here. Once the New Year breaks, our open gyms will be back up and running and so forth. They'll be off the next couple of Sundays because of the holidays. With that, the pool's resting for now, and then Recreation Park, you can see the activities going on out there. We got a busy month of January out there with every weekend pretty much booked up, except for the New Year's Day. And so it's been quite the chore out there too, getting things cleaned up with the weather, and thanks to Public Works and sewer plant and all the help from the different departments to help us with our big site, that Recreation Park, with that major heavy snow with activities. We had a hockey tournament a couple weeks ago, rabbit cat show, so it's been busy out there, which is our goal, to put people up in the hotels and keep moving projects forward. So, any questions, concerns? All right, thank you.
Moving on to Public Works and Utilities, we have agenda item 18, Director of Public Works and Utilities report. Kirby.
So we did get a few things accomplished. I don't know if anybody's noticed the traffic light poles on Jackson. We got those changed out to the same style as our street lights. I think it looks really nice. We did get that guardrail fixed up down there also. We had some complaints on that. And just as FYI, next year our emphasis is on street signing. Primarily the actual street names. We have either missing, lost, faded, whatever the case. We just have a lot of signage that we want to emphasize and work on. Helps out the PD, helps out the ambulance. It's there for a reason. So that's going to be our goal next year, to work on that.
Do we have a new design for the signs, or?
No, no, we wouldn't change that just because it would hopefully fit in with the ones that we have then too, so. And it will be on the east side of Superior is where we're concentrating, so. We also changed out a lot of poles, on Main Street. A lot of those were getting rusted. We went around, fixed a lot of poles that were just out of kilter, out of level, just trying to do those housekeeping items to make our appearance look good out there in the community, and just things that need to be done. Also, we did have a couple of light snow events. One was a little bit heavier. Most of the equipment's running great, and I'd like to emphasize alternate side parking. I did ask the chief of police to, in particular this week, be diligent on the enforcement of that. We've got a lot of snow coming, and there's gonna be a lot of grumpy people out there because it's gonna start piling up in your driveways, your sidewalks, and that's when things get not so good.
I have a question, where are you putting all that snow? I mean, there's piles like on the corner, and the piles are like right on the corner, so it kind of affects the wet, where the right of way, where you can't see. So are you planning on moving that eventually?
So do you mean the larger piles?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going crazy with it today.
Yeah, we caught up with all the piles on the streets. We still have the piles in the parking lots right now that we need to clean up. But those get hauled to a number of locations depending upon which pile we're working on. By Rec Park, the fairgrounds, we work with Transcontinental. They're very accommodating to let us use property right next to the creek.
We're paying to have it taken all months.
And King Avenue,
My backyard, yeah, I know.
King Avenue, behind the EMS building. So we have kind of strategic spots throughout the city that we try to
Because
use.
we're gonna be getting another storm in a couple of days.
Yeah, we're gonna get a lot of snow,
Mhm.
probably a lot more than what we've normally seen. Talking up to 12 inches possibly, and we've already got 8 to 10. So that's what I mean, people are gonna start getting grumpy. Not only our guys moving the snow, but the residents, because they're gonna run out of room. We understand that, but we do not allow for depositing of snow into the city streets. So if you're doing that, please stop that. And like I said, alternate side parking is very important to us. It allows us to go back the next day when the traffic switches and get those sides of the streets plowed back and vice versa. So that's why it's there. And don't throw your shovels at the drivers. We tell all of our drivers, keep going. We're not going to engage with anyone. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of people out there that cuss, swear, throw things. It gets a little ugly at times, so.
I mean, I do think that our drivers could probably straighten the plow at people's driveways.
We're gonna plow it like no different for anybody else. It's gonna go, and that's what we're telling them.
But I think the big thing is where are they supposed to go with the snow? I mean, that's part of plowing. I mean, it's no different than us doing our own driveways or our sidewalks. It's gonna go where it goes. They've got to plow on the ground, and there's nowhere else to go with it.
If you do straighten out your blade, there's less that travels off the side of the blade.
But then we're gonna add to the amount of time, the significant amount of time for the drivers to keep adjusting, and now you're pushing, by straightening your blade, you're pushing accumulative snow back to the middle of the road. It's better to keep it pushed to the side.
Okay, you tell it to the 80-year-old person that's shoveling the driveway and can't do it.
That's not the point, Mitch. The point is the fact that they have a job to do, and their job is to push it to the side of the road.
I get that, but we don't want to burden our citizens that pay for this service either.
But you also don't want to cause accidents by snow going to the middle of the road.
I mean, our streets
Appreciate
right
your
now are not in
comments.
good shape.
We'll try to handle the daily operations for the plowing. But
I'm sorry,
I appreciate your comments,
Yeah.
but we'll handle the daily operations for the plowing.
I've got a lot
And
of
we'll take those
complaints in the
comments
last week.
from residents, just direct them my way, and I'll take that.
Okay, and then I did have one question too. I know you're cleaning up, are we gonna grader the Main Street parking spots and stuff like that, and get that all cleaned up for,
They did this morning,
okay.
once, I don't know how far they got, Mitch,
Okay,
but-
it's still pretty icy, I just,
So they're going to pull Main Street, I believe, Wednesday morning.
okay.
It was either tomorrow or Wednesday morning, I can't remember, so that's when they'll get it. There
I
won't
just,
be-
our parking spots are pretty icy, I just cautious for that.
Right, there won't be anybody parked on Main Street, so they can just go through.
And then, since I'm talking, on a sign thing, I had a question. Are we doing just the name street signs, or are we doing more directional street signs as well?
Right now, we're focused on the street name signs. We always try to get the stop signs and yields and all those other signs to keep them up to par with reflectivity, but
One thing I just thought of, where Butts Avenue and Jackson meets, there should be a sign that says traffic from left and traffic from right does not stop. It's a very confusing area for a lot of drivers that stop turning from Jackson onto Butts either way, and it holds up traffic.
keep that in consideration.
Since I brought it up, so I thought of it.
Kelly, you had a question on?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Are you enforcing the sidewalk, to shovel? Because there's a lot of sidewalks that are not being shoveled.
We enforce the sidewalks with a complaint basis only
Okay.
this time. Now, if that code enforcement person is out and they see other places, they will take that opportunity to enforce those also.
So, a phone call to your office?
Or an email, I believe, is either one.
And then, one last question, what is the trigger amount that the city of Toma goes out and follows with?
It varies, Mitch. I know other cities have policies. We really don't want, well, we don't set at 1 inch we're gonna go out, or at 3 inches we're gonna go out. We take each snowfall case by case basis.
So like Saturday snowfall, I guess there wasn't really any snow.
Right, we went out and salted, that day, and that's kind of why it's a case by case basis. Whether it's right, wrong, a lot of other people do have a policy, but we do not.
I didn't know what our policy was, that's why I asked.
One of the other things I wanted to note is, we do have another retirement coming. We've lost over 100 years of service, or knowledge in the last 3 months. So we'll start the recruitment process on that. Yeah.
Can I ask who's gonna retire?
Sure, Paul Martin, he's been 32 years and 8 years part-time.
Okay.
And tomorrow night you'll see a tenured employee for 42 or 41 years, and the other one was 42 years we lost also.
Is that gonna be a part-time position that you are gonna, he's part-time, correct?
No, that would be a full-time that we would replace, yeah. I think that's about it from the street department. Just be patient with the plow drivers. And sewer department, everything's basically normal out there. I believe that they did stop with the roofing for this week, just because of the upcoming weather, the way it looked. I wanted to touch on the water department. Operational wise, it's normal. We did have Invoice Cloud go live, and that's our payment system. That system was not only implemented for us, but the entire city to get us all on one platform. Building permits, taxes, water and sewer, goes on and on. Or Joe, I won't forget him, we had 4 or 5 different platforms, so tried to get that on one so far. We're probably one of the higher users right at the moment, except for taxes coming up, but it seems to be going pretty well. We had just a couple hiccups, but we did get some feedback. A lot of people don't pay that service charge, but there are options to pay your bill without that. And then another positive note, Merry Christmas. Our water rates are going up in January, and that would be a 4.5% increase. For most people, it's going to be $2, maybe a little bit more, but that is coming up. Lake Committee, we do have a next meetings for January 19th, 5 o'clock if it is needed. We did cancel November, is that right, Devon? Thanks. So you'll probably see a couple ice derby or those types of events maybe come here if the timing doesn't work where the Lake Committee would get a recommendation. So that would be about the only thing that might happen. I think the ice is going to be doing pretty well this week out there, and I think that's all I have, except any other questions.
Did you get the brush pile chip?
Yes, we chipped that. It took about 3 days, I believe it was, so about 24 hours. It'd be just right around $10,000 to do that. We've changed our approach a little bit where it's not just a turnkey process. We go out there with equipment and help facilitate loading that chipper to try to cut back on some of the money. So we could not work it out with burning of that or the alternative that we came up with before. We are going to try one other thing, but no sense telling you about that because if it fails, and I'll just have to say it didn't work. So. But we always try to cut back. I know that was one of the areas where we tried to talk about in the budget where we could try to, save some money, but not everything works, but we did save a little.
So now are those chips free for, people to go grab and use in their gardens or around their, whatever?
Yep, there is a little bit better pile out there that, the, power companies use. They give a little bit better chip. That would be, more suitable, and we usually leave that out there because they're just better. And ours it's more ripped, you know, it's not a clean chip, so, but if you want those, we'll bring your dump truck, we'll load you up. You can have 'em.
Otherwise, what do we do with them?
We dispose of them, we've taken them out on CA before, got our hands slapped by the DNR on that. Did the wetland delineation, in response to that, and took care of that issue. Do have some people come and get them. We have varying disposal sites. I think Joe has been talking about maybe using some, for the disc golf, so that might be an avenue for us to get rid of some.
Okay, we're looking for any avenue possible.
Yep.
Including private citizens and larger quantities.
I mean, we don't wanna advertise, come out here and we're gonna fill you up, cause we can't have a person out there, you know, but a bigger quantity, we would obviously, make arrangements.
Make some arrangements in large quantities, that.
Yep.
People can go out there with 5-gallon buckets and shovels and grab them.
Yeah, have at it.
Any other questions for Kurt?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Normally move on to the police department. I don't see Chief.
He's on vacation.
All right, so his report is in your packet. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Say motion by Mitch, second by Sean. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? As of 8:34, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We got done at 7:07.